Hello, we're at the University of California in Davis to bring you training young trees in your home landscape. We'll show you why it's important to train young trees and give you 5 easy steps to follow. Although we're in California, these techniques can be applied on most trees in other locations.
This video is for home gardeners with a basic knowledge of pruning techniques. Here's what you should already know. Types of pruning, reasons for pruning, basic pruning tools, and making proper cuts. If you're new to pruning, consult one of these resources before trying the techniques shown in this video. Why train young trees?
Trees are assets, providing benefits to the environment and adding value to your property. In nature, trees eventually break apart and decay. During this process, they provide habitat for wildlife and generally improve soil conditions. In urban settings, these natural occurrences can become problems that we cannot afford to have. Trees should be trained wherever they coexist with people and property. Mature trees that haven't been trained are very difficult or impossible to train, so maintenance is more expensive. Frequent pruning or support hardware may be necessary. Properly trained trees are attractive, less prone to failures, and often live longer. Structural training is easy, inexpensive, and a good investment in the future of your tree. These training techniques apply to most landscape trees, including deciduous species, broadleaf evergreens, and conifers. However, they do not apply to palms, multi-stem trees, specialty prune trees, and fruit trees.
What does a well-trained tree look like? A well-trained tree has a single, central, upright leader and well-spaced scaffold branches. Branches have wide, strong angles of attachment and are not too large compared to the trunk. Trees that have not been trained may have codominant stems or leaders. Trees with codominant leaders are more likely to split apart in a strong wind. If all the branches are attached at the same place on the trunk, the overall structure is weak and may break apart. Branches attached at a narrow angle to the trunk are more likely to break off than those with wider angles. What's the investment?
What does it cost to train a young tree? Less than an hour per year and some basic equipment. Hand pruners for branches up to 3/4 of an inch wide, and a handsaw for branches up to several inches wide. Loppers are used to prune larger branches, but aren't good for precision work. A reach pruner makes small cuts 10 to 15 feet from the ground. A pole pruner can cut branches up to 1.5 inches wide, about 6 to 12 feet from the ground. Use a ladder only when the ground is level and you have help. Gloves and safety glasses protect your eyes and hands. Hire a certified arborist for larger trees or trees touching power lines.
When do I prune and how much? Ideally, begin training trees in the first year after planting, and then once a year for 5 to 10 years. If you miss the first year, then start as soon as possible. After 10 years, the tree should be very well trained and need minimal pruning from year to year. How much should I take off? It depends on the size of the tree and the extent of the structural issues. A healthy young tree may tolerate losing up to half of its living foliage, but only prune what is necessary. For trees that lose their leaves in winter, pruning during dormancy usually stimulates new growth in the spring. Summer pruning generally slows tree growth. Now it's time to start pruning. We'll go through a 5-step process.
Follow the 5 steps in order every year. Be sure your tools are sharp, clean, and well oiled before you start. Remember, this structure is your ultimate goal. Before making cuts, however, walk around the tree and observe it from all angles. Check the general structure and distribution of branches. First, we're going to demonstrate the 5 steps on sycamore trees that have a simple structure. Then we'll demonstrate again on plum trees with more complex structure. When we're done, you should be able to apply the 5 steps to a variety of trees and understand why it's better to train trees when they're small.
Step 1. Remove broken, injured, diseased, dying, or dead branches. This is a cleanup step to remove branches that are not suitable for retention. The bark on a dead branch may be wrinkled, sunken, or dry. A living branch will be shiny and may have some green pigment under the bark. Wood will be white and moist. Look around the tree and prune out branches that are dead, broken, diseased, or damaged. Remember, to remove a branch, cut back to its origin on the trunk, just outside the branch collar. Don't leave a stub, and don't cut into the branch collar. Step 2. Select a leader and remove or reduce competing leaders.
The leader is the central stem of the tree. Carefully follow the trunk from bottom to top. A vigorous stem that is in a vertical or nearly vertical position should be the leader. You may want to tie a loose ribbon around the leader so you will remember it. Remove or loosen the ribbon when the 5 steps are complete. Any stem or branch similar in size or position to the leader is a competing leader. Either reduce competing leaders by at least 50% or remove them completely. Remember, to reduce a branch, prune back to a side branch that is about 1/3 the size of the main branch and is pointing outward from the center. Or prune to an outward-facing bud if there is no side branch available.
Step 3. Select the lowest permanent branch. The lowest permanent branch is the lowest scaffold branch that remains in the same position on the trunk for the lifetime of the tree. The height of the lowest permanent branch depends on the location of the tree. We'll show you on this older sycamore. If you want lower branches for screening, the lowest permanent branch could be here. If you want to walk under the tree eventually, the lowest permanent branch would need to be greater than 6 feet high. On a very young tree such as this one, the lowest permanent branch may be very small or not even exist yet. Remember, branches don't move up the trunk as the tree grows, so every branch you see now will grow thicker but still be at the same height years later. The lowest permanent branch should be healthy, well attached, and not more than half the size of the trunk. You may want to tie a loose ribbon around it so you can remember it. Everything below the lowest permanent branch is a temporary branch. Don't cut these off yet. We'll talk about them later. Step 4. Select scaffold branches and reduce or remove competing branches.
Scaffold branches are the framework of the tree above the lowest permanent branch. Scaffolds should be well attached, less than half the diameter of the trunk, and well spaced both vertically along the trunk and radially around the tree. Walk around the tree to choose your scaffold branches. Use loose ribbon if you need to. Some trees, like the sycamore, develop good scaffolds naturally. Remove branches with weak angles of attachment, less than 40 degrees, especially if there is included bark between the trunk and branch. Remove or reduce branches that are more than half the size of the trunk, especially on an older tree. Remove branches that are too close to your chosen scaffold branch. When the tree is mature, scaffold branches should originate 12 to 18 inches apart on the trunk. You should keep small branches between scaffolds on a young tree.
Step 5. Select temporary branches below the lowest permanent branch. These branches are eventually removed, but important to retain when the tree is young. The leaves of temporary branches photosynthesize and provide energy for growth. For vigorous temporary branches, we can reduce them and slow their growth. The lowest permanent branch on this sycamore is way up here. Everything below is temporary. Since the tree is small, we'll reduce the smallest temporaries and remove only the largest one. Now here's our young sycamore before and after completing the 5 steps. A central leader has been established, and the framework of branch development and strong structure has been initiated. The 5 steps in action. For larger trees, it can be much more of a challenge to apply the 5 steps. For example, this sycamore needs more work than the previous smaller tree. In step 1, we removed a few small broken branches. In step 2, we selected a leader and removed a competing stem. For step 3, we selected a lowest permanent branch at about 6 feet. This branch has a strong attachment and is half the diameter of the trunk. We selected 6 scaffold branches on this larger tree in step 4. We chose scaffolds that are well spaced apart, both vertically and radially, have a good angle of attachment, and are less than half the size of the trunk. Finally, we removed large temporaries below the lowest permanent branch and reduced a smaller one. Remember to lightly support the branch when using a saw to avoid tearing the bark. If the branch is heavy, cut it off in sections. Slow down just before completing the cut to control the blade. After completing the 5 steps, a central leader has been established and a strong branch framework developed. At this point, the tree has a structural foundation that can be developed further on from year to year. Trees that start with relatively poor structure are more of a challenge, whether large or small. For example, this small plum tree does not have an established central leader, and the largest branches are low on the trunk and spaced close together. In applying the 5 steps, we selected the most central stem as the leader and cut back competing stems. Where this tree is growing, the lowest permanent branch needs to be at 7 feet, and all of these branches are too low to qualify as a lowest permanent branch. They're too large to be temporary branches, so we need to remove them. Because of the tree's initial poor structure, we had to remove much of the crown. As it grows in subsequent years, we'll continue to prune to develop structure. This small plum has better branch spacing than the previous tree, so less pruning is needed. It has a pretty good central leader, so we just removed one of the large central stems and reduced smaller competing stems. We chose a lowest permanent branch between 5 and 6 feet and established 2 scaffold branches by removing nearby branches. Because its initial structure was better than the previous plum, we didn't need to remove as much. Keep in mind that trees with initial poor structure generally need to be pruned substantially in their formative years, and some impact on growth is likely. Nonetheless, it's better to establish good structure at this point than to be overly concerned about a reduction in growth rate. For larger trees with poor structure, expect a substantial amount of work and a large pile of brush to develop good structure. This plum is a very good example. After removing a few small broken branches, we selected a central leader, removed 3 large competing stems, and reduced several smaller stems. We chose a lowest permanent branch with a good attachment at 6 feet for step 3, and established scaffolds in step 4. Since 3 large branches occur below the lowest permanent branch, these need to be removed in step 5. If they were smaller, they could be reduced or left alone as temporaries. As you can see, a substantial amount of the crown had to be removed to establish good structure, and more pruning will be needed in subsequent years. Since this is still a young tree, it should continue to grow at a satisfactory rate, yet have much improved structure. Clearly, you don't want to wait too long to train young trees. The sooner you start, the better. Tree response to training over time.
We return to the 3 plum trees 1 year later. Here we'll show the trees before and after pruning, both last year and this year. Note how each tree has grown substantially since the initial pruning. It was much easier to apply the 5 steps the second time we pruned, and should be even easier next year.
Summary and review. Before we review the 5 steps again, remember these 3 key points. 1. Try to select trees with good structure at planting time to make training easier. 2. Step back and walk around the tree before and during the training process. 3. Don't wait too long to begin training. Here again are the 5 steps. Step 1. Remove broken, injured, diseased, dying, or dead branches. Step 2. Select a leader and remove or reduce competing leaders. Step 3. Select the lowest permanent branch. Step 4. Select scaffold branches and reduce or remove competing branches. Step 5. Select temporary branches below the lowest permanent branch.
Thanks for watching. We hope this information is useful and that you'll have beautiful, well-trained trees in your yard for years to come.
For more information, consult your local Master Gardener program.